Patrick Hicks Music Stories presents Every Grammys Ever. Episode 8, the 7th Annual Grammy Awards, April 13th, 1965. This was the Grammys that covered the year 1964, and so it represents a significant turning point in music history. The Beatles have now entered the Grammy picture, and things will never be the same. Music in general changed forever on February 9th, 1964, when 73 million Americans watched the Beatles on their first appearance on The Ed Sullivan Show. The amount of people influenced by that moment alone to pick up instruments and start playing music was huge. Everyone from Bruce Springsteen to Tom Petty to Billy Joel to bands like Heart, Devo, Kiss, and that was just the beginning. The way that the Beatles pushed things forward with songwriting, recording techniques, and making albums cannot be overstated. And the Beatles' impact at the Grammys was pretty much immediate. In what had to have been the biggest slam dunk in Grammy history, they won Best New Artist. They also won Best Performance by a Vocal Group for A Hard Day's Night, and they had 3 other nominations, including for Record of the Year for I Wanna Hold Your Hand, and for Song of the Year for A Hard Day's Night. The other nomination, by the way, was for Best Rock and Roll Recording, which they lost to Petula Clark's Downtown. They were also represented at the awards in some quirkier ways. Remember back at the first awards show when the Chipmunks song won a couple Grammys? Well, this year there was an album released called The Chipmunks Sing the Beatles, and it actually won a Grammy too. This year's ceremony, which took place in not just Chicago, New York, and Los Angeles, but also for the first time in Nashville, was back on television. NBC did another The Best on Record special, and this one was hosted by Steve Allen. And he made a joke that at this time in music, it was good to be a Beatle or a Chipmunk, and a little tougher to be a person. Steve Allen also makes a reference to the Rolling Stones, even though they're not nominated and won't be for a very criminally long time. He makes the joke that sometimes he puts on the Rolling Stones so that he can turn them off. Now, we know already at this point that the Grammys are pretty biased against rock music, but rock and roll is becoming the dominant cultural force in music, even more than it was before, and if the Grammys don't get on board, they're gonna get left behind. And in the other big categories this year, besides Best New Artist, they're not on board. Song of the Year goes to the song Hello Dolly, which had been a hit in 1964 for Louis Armstrong.
Hello, Dolly, this is Louis Dolly. Mighty glad to have you back where you belong.
And Record of the Year went to The Girl from Ipanema by Stan Getz and João Gilberto, which is, I think, more famous now as the song used as elevator music in every single TV show and movie. And maybe for the story about how the actual singer on the track, Gilberto's wife, Astrid Gilberto, was only paid $120 for singing the song and never got any royalties and was divorced from Gilberto that same year.
Tall and tan and young and lovely, the girl from Ipanema goes walking.
And now here are the nominees for Album of the Year. Last year's winner, Barbra Streisand, is back with the album People. Our old friend Henry Mancini is back with The Pink Panther. Another soundtrack that's nominated is Funny Girl. The trumpeter Al Hirt gets another Album of the Year nomination with his album Cotton Candy. And then the album gets Gilberto from Stan Getz and João Gilberto. I think I pronounced João Gilberto's name 10 different times in this video. I apologize. Now, before we get to the winner, let's talk about what else was released in 1964. Of course, The Beatles' A Hard Day's Night was released this year, but snubbed from Album of the Year. Maybe even worse is that Bob Dylan released The Times They Are A-Changin', which only received a nomination for Best Folk Recording, which it lost to Gail Garnett. And then you have a slew of classics from early British invasion bands. You have the first album from the Kinks, you have the Animals, you have the Rolling Stones, all ignored by the Academy. And the winner is... Gets Gilberto. Man, I can't believe I had to say that last name one more time. This album wins and becomes the first jazz album to win Album of the Year. But it's hard to be too mad at this pick. I mean, The Girl from Ipanema is believed to be the second most recorded song of all time, although the first, of course, is Yesterday by the Beatles. It's also worth noting that the big winner on this night wasn't the Beatles or Stan Getz and João Gilberto. It was actually Roger Miller, the country singer, who took home the most awards this night with 5. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time for the highs and lows of the 8th Annual Grammy Awards in 1966.